We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
This year has seen some notable trials. Derek Chauvin for the murder of George Floyd being one of the most prominent, and of course the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. Now, we regular folk, we watch the media portrayal of events and wonder not if people are getting a fair shot, but whether courts will find someone guilty or innocent based upon how the result will look to the public. Can we really even have justice anymore? Well, to help us tackle that conundrum is host of the excellent Uprising podcast and Liberty Nation's legal affairs editor, Mr. Scott D. Cosenza. Thanks for being here, Scott.
Thank you, Mark.
Now tell me, if justice is blind and impartial, why do we have such differing opinions from different courts? Not just on the trial for criminal prosecutions, but for legal decisions made about politics. Doesn't this signify that something's amiss in the United States?
I think it's something amiss in the human condition, more likely. We are all sinners. We all have to, I think, always guard against the notion that the other person is doing what they're doing out of a malevolence or willingness to kind of play dirty rather than their own delusion that their desires are manifest in the original writing. So if in the instance, I spend a lot of my time studying the Supreme Court and looking at their rulings and arguments before them. And it would be easy to say for the Supreme Court justices that write diametrically opposed opinions to the ones that I would favor, well, they're doing it because they just want that outcome for the law. But it's probably a better reason to think that they see that answer in the law, I think. Certainly some are malignant, but I think it's more just a question of people see what they want to and have a massive and unlimited capacity for self-delusion. Not that I'm calling any of the justices delusional.
Well, to carry on from that point, a lot of judges and justices, of course, are politically appointed. So surely let's call it their reading of a certain law or their interpretation of a law, that's what prompts them to be elected. So let's just say, for example, to be nominated. So let's just say, for example, one person consistently rules on an ideological principle that is favorable to the government at the time. They're going to get the position over somebody who consistently rules against that. So what their motivations are, it sort of becomes irrelevant because the end result is that you're going to get this result 9 times out of 10.
Chief Justice John Roberts, Mark, famously said that there are no Republican justices and Democrat justices. And I forget who, but one of these people who makes it their business to make sure that there are Republican justices, for instance, said something, I forget how many millions of dollars they spent, to try to get Donald Trump into elected office so that he would appoint certain justices. So the notion, it's sort of a pleasant fiction for those justices to not realize that they are, in fact, they're on team this or team that. Oftentimes, that's how they're perceived by the people who put them in that position. I think it's just, you have people that have different ideological kind of makeup and filters for how they see the law and society. And, picking those people becomes very important to those of us who have a particular vision for that. I can tell you that, I've worked hard to see that people who are appointed to the court, through various political processes, is what I mean by that, that they favor limited government and not expansive government. And there are, I think, readings of the Constitution that can include some expansive government that doesn't make those readers delusional.
Oh, yeah, there's also this issue of social justice, which really shouldn't be anything to do with the legal world, but it's certainly becoming so on a more day-to-day basis. Now, that started as a term supposedly linked to fairness, but it seems that in reality it means that for practical intents and purposes, it means that the hard left are going to riot if the courts don't deliver the verdict that the hard left wants. Maybe that's a little of a jaded opinion, but it's certainly backed up by evidence. So how can a jury, for example, a jury of peers, fairly bring in a verdict if they think that their city is going to burn if they cast the wrong vote? Or even worse, that they could be targeted personally by folks who are taking their pictures surreptitiously in court and getting ready to dox them. How can they cast their verdict without fear of retribution.
Mark, I'll take your second question first, which is that it is the job of the judge, the court, we say, the court and the attorneys to make sure through advocacy and implementation of sound policies that those jurors, to the extent possible, have those concerns minimized. And also during the voir dire process, that only jurors with a robust sense of civic duty and understanding of their own duty in the law in the face of uncomfortableness and threats to do justice are impaneled in the jury. Now, those are perhaps just lofty talking points, but when the rubber meets the road, that's what needs to happen. You can't completely remove this idea of social pressure and worse, I think. But that's what the law demands, and that's what jurors and courts, try to suss out and get through. I would say to the second part about social justice, it is without question the unmitigated enemy of individual justice, which is what the entirety of our justice system relies and depends on. I am not to be judged because I am a white man in any proceeding before courts in the United States. I am to be judged based on behavior that I may have engaged in. And characteristics that involve social justice are absolutely not appropriate for anything like that in the courtroom. It's an abomination, and I think it's the job of media and legal figures to say that early and often. This is a construct for, I don't know, university funding maybe, but definitely not for courtrooms in the United States.
Well, to continue with the unraveling bow, let's talk about President Biden weighing in on these trials as well. Now, I would, as a non-legal mind, I would say that there's something about the appeal to authority where if the president of the United States is saying this person is, for example, guilty of murder, this person is a white supremacist, that there's going to be some mental impact on the jurors. So is the president right to, and other politicians, of course, not just singling out Joe Biden, this happens across the board, across the political
spectrum. Sure, I understand. Well, one of the things you could ask the jurors is, did they see that disgusting tweet made by Joe Biden, for instance, in the Rittenhouse matter? Or do they even have Twitter, have a Twitter account? I mean, you and I live in the world where it's obvious that, something that's widely seen on Twitter would be widely seen, but there are plenty of Americans who have never even been on Twitter. So those are the things that are appropriate to get into with an individual examination of potential jurors and suss out perhaps any bias. Now, for the second part of it is the kind of court of public opinion, if you will. And that's why presidents should shut their mouths.
Well, there's an interesting phrase we have in the UK. It's called "innocent until proven guilty," and it's I'm sure something that the American political class of all stripes could do well to adopt in their posturing.
Well, that's appropriate for the legal world, but not Twitter world, Mark. It's
of course
sentence first, then the verdict.
It seems to me that we're on a dangerous path here, Scott. Justice by the mob, aided by the media and supported by the political class. Now, perhaps I'm being a little hyperbolic here, but it all seems designed to scare folks into not exercising the rights granted to them by the nation's founding documents.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Expand, please.
That's exactly what those things are being offered for. They're being offered to scare people into doing the will of the speaker, which is to convict or not convict, as the case may be. And it's not acceptable. And prosecutors should, this is a political position, the prosecutor's office, generally speaking. But I would suggest that prosecutors should be targeting those folks for prosecution if their conduct rises to the level of an attempt to inappropriately and illegally influence a jury. And some of it seems to be on the plain face of it, and others just seems to be spouting off. So there are, gradations there.
Scott D. Cosenza, thank you ever so much for being here.
Thanks, Mark.
And that's it for this week on Liberty Nation Radio. I want to thank our guests, Jeff Charles, Andrew Moran, and our Say What superstar, Mr. Tim Donner, and of course, Talking Liberty's Scott Cosenza. And most of all, my heartfelt thanks to you, the listener, for being here. A parting shot before we finish. Noted economist and author Thomas Sowell wrote, quote, "In politics, the great non sequitur of our time is that one, things are not right, and two, that government should make them right. Where right all too often means cosmic justice, trying to set things right means writing a blank check of a never-ending expansion of government power. End quote. Perhaps it's time for a return to justice where the individual and individual rights are the watchwords. For without rugged individualism, there would be no America. Thanks for listening. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides. Who are we? We are Americans that believe in liberty. We are a project of the nonprofit One Generation Away. We are patriots who apply the founding principles to the issues of today.
And they keep moving the goalposts on us.
We are educators and commentators who love America and the Constitution. Who are we? We are Liberty Nation.